Welcome to the Everything Yachting YouTube channel. Our goal is to help yacht buyers, yacht owners, and yacht sellers through interesting, educational, and informative discussions on topics that are anything and everything yachting related. Hello friends, and welcome to the Everything Yachting podcast with Captain Eric Gervais. I have a very special guest today. It's this gentleman here to my right. He's done something with some people that is less than what you would think for accomplishments in a year. What I'm trying to say is more people reportedly climb Mount Everest than do the Great Loop on a yacht. And this guy's done it. He did it in a brand new boat. They went to a whole bunch of places, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So if you're sitting in your office working really hard, growing your business, and want to get out there and experience the best that America has to offer via the waterways, I hope you learned something today. That's the intent. He happened to do it in a Marlow Explorer. He's got some experience, and that's what we're going to talk about. So Bryce, how did you get into the yachting industry?
So I was kind of born into the industry. My father was a captain, and so instead of going to a babysitter when I was young, it was go to work with Dad. And after finishing college, I just decided that I was going to pursue my passion, and I've just been enjoying it ever since.
Okay, so you took the traditional high school graduation, go to college, you get a degree in something. What was your degree in, by the way?
Mechanical engineering.
Okay, so an easy one, right?
Oh, yeah.
Super easy degree. And did you ever work as an engineer?
So no, I had some internships, but for the most part, I kind of always grew up with the mindset as an engineer, just problem solving ultimately.
Yep.
And that's where I kind of really enjoyed being a captain, because it all is problem solving.
Yep.
You're constantly just trying to work through problems and situations and find solutions.
How has that helped you? Well, let me even back up before I ask that question. I'm going to re-ask that question, but I'm going to say, how long have you been a captain? How many different boats have you run? Give us a scope here so the people understand who you are. And then in that, I want to know along the way how the engineering background has helped you.
Okay. So the big thing is, again, I grew up doing it, so I had built a lot of sea time. And so as early as I could, I acquired my captain's license. I worked at a sea school for a while, and I was loving the instruction side of things and helping people get certified on the water and to safely maneuver their own vessels. And so that's been going on for easily the last 12 years. And so I've just been upgrading as time went on. And I really fell in love with the private side of things, the private yachts, because it's just more of a family-oriented side versus the commercial yachts or the commercial side of the industry. And it's just kind of blossomed for me. And I'm just a little bit more personable. So it always kind of worked out when being in tight quarters, in other words.
Okay. So smallest yacht you've captained was what?
So for the longest time, I was running vessels in the 30 to 40 foot range. I really kind of fell in love with single-handing boats. Okay. And so that was kind of perfecting the craft, in other words. Nobody's perfect out in the water, of course, but it was just more fun, and a lot of people were allowing me in that size vessel to run and operate it by myself. Yeah. And from there, it's just kind of stepped in easily and kind of grown up to about comfortably running boats up to 90 feet. Okay. And just kind of more invested in vessels that are constantly moving. And I kind of see that up to that size level.
Okay, and what type of a captain's license do you have?
I have a 200-ton master's license.
All right, so if you didn't understand what we just talked about, this is a very experienced person, okay? Not only is he intelligent and having got out and got an engineering degree, but he's been able to get a 200-ton master's license, and he's run a lot of different size boats. So that should give you a background of whatever comes up next, all right? So from that, I want to ask, where have you gone north, south, east, and west in your total boating career?
Total boating career? Yep. So as far north as I've been up to Saint-Anne-du-Mont, which is far up above Prince Edward Island, at the top of the mouth, I should say, of the St. Lawrence Seaway. As far south, I've been as far down as it would be St. Kitts. Okay. And as far east would be Halifax, Nova Scotia in North America, and as far west would be St. Louis down the river waterways down the Mississippi.
Okay, so and how many different boats would you say?
About 50 different boats just in the last 10 years. I did a lot of deliveries, and I've been full-time on probably 5 different yachts ranging from 60 to 90 feet.
Okay, so that's a qualified opinion and somebody who's done a lot on boats. So that's impressive. And may I ask how old you are?
I turned 30 in January, so.
Okay, You've been doing this from the get-go.
From the get-go.
Okay. All right. Now let's dive in a little bit deep. So I met some people. We built them a beautiful Marlow. It was a 62E, and they needed to have a captain based on insurance reasons, just to oversimplify the conversation, because as you start out in maybe a 20-foot pontoon boat and then you want to buy a 40-foot pontoon boat, you got to have a conversation with the insurance man about, can you do that? A lot of times they've got some things like 15 feet or 10 feet comfort levels that you can go up. So if you want to go buy a 50-foot boat when you sell your business and you don't want to have a captain, you might want to start thinking about going out and buying a smaller boat now to practice so that you can qualify to get and operate that 50-foot boat when the time comes. If you just want to go out and buy that 50-foot boat and hire a training captain, then somebody like Bryce could come out and train you until you're signed off on your ability to run that boat by the captain and by the insurance company. Or you could just hire a captain and do it full time and have them run the boat. So let's get into how your experience was. How did it start? Where did you go? What did you do? Where was your favorite place? I kind of like throwing a lot of questions just to see what we come up with.
No, of course. So as far as the process in which joining Serendipity, initially they had brought me on to help them get the boat from the Fort Lauderdale area when they took delivery and get it back to their home in Jacksonville, Florida. And after being on the boat for a few days, we all kind of we meshed really well. He had desired to run the boat himself, but he really fell in love with being able to relax and take the stress out of operations on the vessel. And so at that point, we reached Jacksonville. He asked me to bring it to his home in Michigan. And I was super happy to have that opportunity because I'd never been able to head that far north necessarily. And so Maine, the Maritimes was new. Canada was all new, of course, all the Great Lakes. And so we had a great adventure ahead of us alone just heading to Michigan.
So if I want to pause, if I'm the guy that is going to buy that 62-foot boat today, and you've gone and done it from here up to Michigan, let's just say, let's cut it off. What should I know that maybe you didn't think of that would be valuable to somebody right there?
So heading up to Michigan, we decided to take the longer route, I should say, and heading up into the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Northern Canadian area in Quebec. The biggest thing that I didn't realize at the time was, of course, how cold it gets. And with that being the case, a lot of the marinas are not built or ready for year-round operation. And with that being the situation, their docks are more temporary. So just the infrastructure, the fueling, the power, all that is a big issue up there for a lot larger yachts, so to say. And so as we headed north, we found less marinas that were able to fit us, and also of less fuel stops and lower capacities when it comes to voltage on the docks. But at the same time, we just it spread out our trip. So we had to make our days longer in that sense versus having multiple stops back to back to back.
Okay, and how long did you guys cruise and shake down this new Marlow before you set off on your trip? I would think most people would say 3 or 6 months would be an average shakedown period before you go on any grand adventure, right? Because it's not just the vehicle, it's also the operators, it's also the equipment supplies. We want to make sure everything's together and we're ready to go. So tell me about your preparation time.
So I got on the boat happily, and it had 30 hours on it at the time we took delivery. And so as we headed north, that was our shakedown. So getting it to Jacksonville, it was about 350 miles and about 3 days of cruising, so maybe 30 more hours. After that, we decided to take this long jump. And of course, being in the industry for a while, you kind of know that sometimes new boats, they have problems and they have little issues you're going to have to deal with. And going further and further away from the manufacturer and all the help that we have, it can be tough at times. And so ultimately, it was pretty shocking to be able to make such a trip with very little issues as we headed north. And I'm still shocked to this day that the boat did so well. I'd never been on a Marlow before, and I completely fell in love with it in the sense that they're built really well and they're built by boaters for boaters. And that's just kind of what I took away from it initially and overall.
So I got to back up here because I got to hit myself in the head for a second. We didn't do any pre-trip prep. We literally just turned the keys in at 30 hours and did the Great Loop.
Yeah, turned the keys, put fuel in it.
You had to have been stranded at some place for months unexpectedly.
No.
Wow.
That's why we got it done so fast. It was pretty unique. We put, I think it was 50 stops between here and Michigan, and between every which one, it was just smooth seas and sailing. And from little situations that we'd have with maybe a toilet getting clogged, sadly, That was about the only, stressful thing for me to have to deal with between here and Michigan. So
Welcome
I
to
was quite
boating,
happy.
right?
Oh
Somebody
my gosh,
flushed something they probably weren't supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody had to figure it out. But those are the tough days on the job, I would say.
So how many miles was that shakedown cruise?
The shakedown in Michigan was about 5,000 miles.
Okay.
Or
What was
excuse
the
me,
total?
yeah, 5,000 miles.
What was the total?
Total is 8,000 miles.
Okay, so
8,009.
In a year or less than a year?
11 months and some change.
All right, so in less than a year, they took a brand new boat. They did the Great Loop, which again is more of an accomplishment, statistically speaking, than the number of people that climb Mount Everest. They did it without really prep work. They just turned the keys in and go. How many marinas did you go to?
92.
92 marinas anchoring out?
We only anchored out twice when we had to. We had some puppies on the boat, so we really had to make sure they had somewhere to use the bathroom.
All right, so pets aboard the boat needed to get off. So marinas was plan A, but you did have some spots where you had to anchor.
Yeah.
And that might come into the good, the bad, and the ugly question that I have. So you take a 62 Marlow, which has an LOA of approximately
72 feet.
72 feet, and you say, we're going. There's got to be some good and bad in that. We talked about a lot of good, right? We didn't have any issues. We did the Great Loop and successfully with a brand new boat. There's got to be some bad. So tell us some bad.
So besides the toilet, probably the toughest part of the bad would be the St. Lawrence Seaway. As you get south of Montreal, there's a great lock system, and it's comparable to the Panama Canal. So some really giant locks, that 5 of which are monitored by the Canada and 2 of which are monitored by America. And so with that being the case, it was a little tricky because besides just having to pay for the locks, they're on a schedule because there's so much commercial traffic and large ships traveling in and out that we had to find a time to go as private travel vessels. And in that case, you'd pull up to some locks and you just hope that you could get in at that point, because you'd have a time set on a schedule that you would be able to get in, but you would have to wait for a green light. And so you could pull up, be looking at a wide open lock that's of course massive at the same time, but it would take some time or it would take an hour or so for them to give us the green light to pull in. And so that really created probably one of the longest days on the trip, and it was about 14 hours of travel that day, and we ultimately made 6 of the locks. And the Canadian locks also only run 8 to 5. And so after 5 p.m., I believe it was, they had closed the final one. And so there was no way to continue on. So we were kind of stuck between the last 2 locks. And so we thankfully found a public dock there that was at the U.S. lock and stayed for the evening. And it also just ended up being one of the worst thunderstorms that happened was while we were at that dock. So thankfully we were tied up and not anchored. But that was probably the toughest day for me, or the bad of the trip. And I was happy to get through it. I'm happy to have no real major issues or catastrophes, but that definitely was one of the toughest parts.
That's a long day for sure.
Oh yeah, long day.
What is there anything that you could have brought from the start? Like that again, that guy's in Ohio, and he's starting to buy his stuff for his trip. What could have been something that maybe you wish you brought with you that you didn't have?
I guess the biggest thing to bring, I don't know, we had tons of fenders and lines. That's the big thing with all those big locks. So I would have to say, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. I'm trying to think of what else we would bring, because I mean, it's hard to think of such a perfect trip, and there was something else we would add to it. A microwave. A microwave would have been nice. So that's the one thing, and we kind of joke about it, that we should have brought a microwave on the boat. But
Okay, all right. If you have a small amount of fuel capacity, if I've got a 500-gallon, fuel tank, would that have been sufficient, or a 1,000-gallon fuel tank? What size fuel tank do you have?
2,250 gallons.
Okay, so you've got some range.
Yeah.
What type of power do you take?
We take dual 50 amps.
Okay, can you run off a single power cord, or do you need both?
We could power manage a little bit, which was really great with the systems on the boat. And traveling north, of course, we didn't need as much AC. And so sometimes we could get away with a 50 amp. But again, the problem up there at the same time was they were very restricted on the amount of electrical or electricity that they could have available.
Right, so they brought a pretty big boat, but it had some things going for it. It had the ability to run off of 250s or a single 50, or maybe even a step down from a 50 to a 30, or just run a generator, which probably was pretty quiet, and maybe you never got a complaint about that. And having some fuel capacity, maybe if I couldn't get fuel in this town, I could skip this town and go to the next town. So was there anything the boat had on it that was helpful? You know?
Oh, definitely the fuel range was great. I very rarely had to even stress the fuel gauge, and that's the two things I worry about on a boat: a depth finder and a fuel gauge. And the fact that I didn't have to stress it at all on the trip was great. And even with the fuel restrictions we had, it was mostly based on they would only give you so much at a time. So I would want to get 1,000 gallons and not get fuel for a week, but they'd only want to give me 1,000 liters. And at that point, it would be a little tough. And so we ended up making more fuel stops along the way at each marina we had designed to stay at anyways, but it just created more time at a fuel dock, which is always more fun.
So having extra room to put extra fuel is a value?
Oh yeah, definitely. The larger tank, most of the vessels I had been on had been 1,000 to 2,000 in the range, but that little bit of extra fuel, I don't think we ever dipped below 300 gallons in the tank, which was nice.
Okay, all right. What was your favorite stop?
So tons of great places. I mean, 92 marinas, but the one place we all agree on the boat that we would go back to in a heartbeat is Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Okay, what was it? What was the draw?
We had actually originally started at the Royal Squadron Nova Scotia, or Yacht Club of Nova Scotia, and it was a long walk for the pups. And so I went into town in Halifax, downtown, and walked around, and I found this naval ship museum, and they had all these beautiful boats in the water, and there was a nice slip right in between. And so I went in, I kind of talked a little bit, and they gave us the green light to bring the boat and put it there at the museum in downtown Halifax. And so we brought Serendipity around hours later and docked her right in the main strip on the boardwalk of Halifax, and just it was safe, it was clean, there was great music and shops everywhere, and just everybody was happy. And I got to adventure around, and I had a good captain's day ashore, and so was pretty happy with Halifax, and it was definitely intriguing to me.
What was the average perception of people who saw Serendipity? She's got a one-of-a-kind hull color. So,
oh yeah, the color was a big attraction, and of course her size in most places they'd come up and see, but everybody would walk up, they'd be
bigger
like,
bigger than what they normally see?
Oh yeah, way bigger. And it was definitely unique to be the pretty boat everywhere, and I really enjoy it. That's what I thrive on, is being the captain of the prettiest boat around. And everybody was always intrigued about what type of boat it was, because she looks so classic and her lines are great, but at the same time people would never expect it to be a 2023 if they're not in the industry, and they were always shocked to see how clean and how new she was.
Let's talk about performance and seagoing ability. What type of seas did you see on that trip? What type of speeds did you see? How many people passed you up? All that good stuff.
We were definitely taking first place most of the time. We passed more boats than that passed us, and definitely in the size range as far as yachts, we were overtaking everyone. But we cruised about 17 knots on average, and 17 to 20 knots. So we were moving pretty good. We were burning some fuel and putting some miles under the boat, but mostly because it performed so well. We burned very little fuel at that speed, and so either it was 10 knots as we came through the inland waterways, or we were about 17 to 20 knots.
Okay. What type of seas did you get into?
Largest seas we saw were between Montauk and Block Island, which was kind of a sneaker because we pulled out and it was just glass. And it's only about a 30-mile crossing, and the mid 10 miles of the trip were just probably 8 to 10 foot, just big swells. It was a weird direction, so we kind of changed our direct course a little bit. But ultimately, it never got to where it was dangerous. It was just a matter of comfort on the boat. And the quick gyro did a really good job on the boat. I was very pleased with it. It was the first one that I had on a vessel. I've had plenty of Seakeepers, but I never had one problem with the quick gyro. And it definitely performed even in those big seas.
And what's your propulsion package? What do you have?
The Volvos.
Okay, and how did they perform?
Great. And to be honest, I was nervous at first. I've always grown up a Caterpillar guy. And so getting on anything with a Volvo, just from previous experiences, sometimes you can have some sensor issues, but whatever it was ironed out at that point, because we put 760 hours on those Volvos, and they started up every time I needed them to start, and they ramped up and slowed down with no problems, and they ran smooth and efficient.
And do you have a microwave on the boat now?
I do have a microwave.
Good.
Oh
good.
my gosh. Oh.
You've run 50 boats, right?
Yes, sir.
What was your favorite one you've ever run and why?
So everybody's always asked me this question because, of course, I've been on a bunch, and it's kind of hard to nail down at first. And I used to always say my favorite boat is one that moves. And so to get on Serendipity, the Marlow 62E, and to take it on such a voyage that was super special to me and everybody involved, she's my favorite boat.
That's awesome, man.
She is my favorite boat.
That's awesome. You think you'll be running more Marlows, and have you run any other boats since then?
Yeah, no, I definitely am a Marlow guy now. I'm a believer. And it was interesting because I'd seen them all around all the time, and I was always kind of curious. And because they have a design that would appear to be more of a trawler, kind of a slow roller, and I always like to pick things up and get on a plane. And so the first time I got on it, actually in Fort Lauderdale, and put it on a plane, it jumped up and we caught up to all the center consoles running in and out of the inlet, and I was like, okay, she's got some pep to her. So after that, I've been kind of hooked. So to have a classic, stable boat and be able to put it up to speed, I definitely am a believer in Marlow. And so I've got to run a couple others now at this point, different variations, of course, and they're a dream to handle. And for a captain, I'll be happy to get on any single one of them that they allow me to.
All right, awesome. So we've got somebody sitting somewhere in the world, and they're interested in a Marlow now. They're interested in doing the Great Loop. You've experienced it in a fairly large Marlow to do the Great Loop. I think the biggest one we've had was a 78 do it. Mm-hmm. They had to anchor out probably more than you did. Mm-hmm. Maybe they didn't have dogs, so it wasn't a thing. I personally love anchoring out. It's one of my favorite nights on a boat. But everybody has their own thing. But what would you tell them? Let's give them 5 tips that they should be noodling on or getting better at, or call and ask us to discuss either options, sizes, speeds. I don't know. What do you got to say?
I guess the big thing is ultimately with any boat you're purchasing is where you want to take it, what you want to do with it, how often you want to be on the vessel, and how many people want to be on it constantly. For a couple, I always recommend they find a size that's comfortable for them to operate and run, but also to live, because of course most people grow up in different housing situations, but moving on to a vessel, it's definitely a big change. It's a little bit smaller, the storage a little bit smaller, so you have to downsize a little bit. But in that sense, you kind of give up that lifestyle to travel and constantly on the move and see some beautiful things. So definitely the figuring out what size you want, that's one of the biggest ones. The power, if you're wanting to kind of slow roll or fly by the seat of your pants most of the time, finding that efficient engine setup, that's a very keen thing that I definitely recommend.
What was your optimal speed and distances you need to pack in? Like, is there if my boat only does 5 knots, or my boat only does 10 knots, or only does 15 knots, is there a too slow?
No, so I've done sailboats and I've done power boats. So I've seen slow and I've seen as fast as we can go. And really, you can have anything. It also matters on how many stops you want to make. Sometimes people want to jump around, island hop, whatever you want to call it. But you could have 20-mile days at minimum, and that's kind of like what we had on the trip. We had some days that were 25 miles, and we'd have other days that were 200 miles. The big thing is also your comfort on the boat. And so getting into the boating industry first, 10-hour day underway can be long and grueling, especially for those just sitting around. And if there's nothing special to do, it can kind of burn you out. And so having those shorter days on the water can really help you enjoy it and getting to see more places at the same time. But slowing things down, you save a lot of money on fuel, and you also shorten the length of which you have to run each day.
Mm-hmm. And let's just flip it for a second. I'm your captain. You just bought the 62 Marlow, and you want to go in the Great Loop. Would you take the exact same path? Would you do anything different? What would your dream Great Loop trip be? And how many people on that 62 would you have with you, as an example? Because I don't know how many they had. Did they always have a full boat?
So for the most part, they had a lot of friends and family, and we were trying to make sure other people got to enjoy it, because it was really something special. And involving the Nova Scotia, St. Lawrence through Canada route, it really extended the trip. Typically the loop can be done in about 6,000 miles, I believe, and so we added about 2,000 miles by going the extended route. And that to me was very special, to do something that not many people get to do. And with them having 5 people on the boat, it didn't ever feel cramped. And so even for the 62, happily or easily could having 5 to 6 people aboard. Everybody enjoyed it, never felt cramped, and we constantly were outreaching to more and more people to come and join us because it was special and we really enjoyed the trip.
And that was a 3-stateroom boat with crew quarters.
Yeah, 3 staterooms with crew quarters. Me, I love our crew quarters, and the beach club in the 62E was by far my favorite I've ever been in as well on the water. And it was comfortable. I have my space to get away, to kind of relax and unwind and kind of give them their own time aboard so they can enjoy their trip. But we all were family on the boat. So we would spend breakfast, lunch, and dinner together aboard and comfortably just moved around and never had any issues.
What did you like about the beach club? What was a feature that you were just happy with or got to use that?
Well, besides the cool carbon fiber running through the floor, I mean, the woodwork in there was beautiful.
Just like the rest of the boat.
Yeah, no, the woodwork is just amazing. And so for them to add that into the beach club really made it special for me, because sometimes crew quarters can get really based down and just be
A
all
broom
files
closet.
up.
Yeah, who likes to stay in a broom closet?
No,
you know?
and I made the joke early on in the trip. I said, oh, I'm going to go reside in the dungeon. And I never lived that down because it never once felt like a dungeon. It was definitely the beach club. And I love telling everybody I was residing in the beach club on the yacht. So it was pretty cool.
Did you ever open the door?
Oh,
at
I
night?
opened up loud and proud. I had my own Sonos radio system in there, so I'd crank the tunes. And but the AC always stayed cold. I'd kept it like a meat locker in there, and just having my own ability to have frozen food and drinks, it was kind of nice to have my own little space to unwind after those long days on the water.
Yep. Did you guys ever use that as a beach club, traditional beach club where the whole family was down there, or is that more your space?
Yeah, well, that's where we wanted to go to the Bahamas. We sadly did not get to, but we will. And that's where the beach club was really nice. We dropped it down a couple times to enjoy it. My goal is to put a big TV on the bottom of the hatch so we can have a bar on the back of the boat.
That'd be pretty cool.
But I love the platform set up on the 62E because I call it the dance floor. And aside from just having everybody back there, it was always just a place to hang out. They wanted to fish a little bit off the back of the boat. And the underwater lights at night, we had a lot of activity. And so a lot of the times in the evenings, we would all find ourselves leaning against the staples on the platform, enjoying the underwater lights, enjoying all the fish, and also catching some fish, which was fun. But besides that, it was just very safe getting people on and off the vessel. And so I definitely really liked the approach of the beach club and just the whole stern and the whole, pretty much.
That's awesome. That's awesome feedback. It's great to hear. Any challenging spots?
Challenging spots.
Depth maybe,
So
narrowness, width, height,
Yeah, no, there's always tight places and tight slips. Going to 92 different marinas, we were pretty lucky to not put a scratch on the boat. And we had some really challenging spots up north because the tidal change was so high near the Bay of Fundy. It was nearly 25-foot tidal changes. And so we had to really watch our lines and also our depth. When we came down the Mississippi waterway, it was also 30 feet down on average when we came down. So a few marinas were restricted. We drew about between 5.5 to 6 feet. And so most of the time traveling, we were just constantly looking for good water. And in the Mississippi, it was a little tough. And a lot of the time I had to ask Dockmaster to trust me. Be like, hey, you're saying I have 6 feet, allow me to come in. And so no problems. We didn't take any prop speed off the bottom of off the props, and we stayed off the bottom. So to have no major catastrophes traveling with low tides up in Bay Fundy and in the Mississippi was truly a blessing.
So that sounds like a super successful trip, a grand adventure. I'm very proud to be able to say that Marlow did that with so few of anything to squawk about, if we're going to be counting the squawk list here. Where's that going next? Like, if you took a dart and said, all right, loop's done, we're not going to go do that again, and just threw the dart at the board, where's that?
So we love the Maritimes. And after doing the inland waterways, they also have another boat. They'll probably continue to keep the other boat in the Great Lakes, and so we're going to continue to bounce along the East Coast. We might dip up into the Ottawa Canal, up further towards Canada again, and go to the Saguenay River in Tadoussac to go check out the whales again, because we really fell in love with the whale watching up there. And there was a fjord up there that was just exquisite that we could spend weeks. So that's about as far north as we'll go. We got some special birthdays to celebrate next year, and so we're looking to go to the Caribbean and put Serendipity in some nice crystal water where we can enjoy the beaches and the sun, and really make that Bentley blue pop in the water.
Okay. And on the East Coast, from Maine down to Florida, what are your favorite 3 stops you guys went to?
Favorite 3 stops? I would have to say St. Michael's, Maryland was really intriguing to me. I really loved it. It was a great little small town, great food, and just clean, very, very clean. And no issues at all with dockage. They had plenty of power, and fuel was cheap, so that was nice. Besides that, I would also say Rockland, Maine. They had the best safe harbor marina I was ever at. Just how they took care of us and how they treated us and greeted us the whole time. I would go up to Rockland over and time again. And then, of course, I'm a Florida boy, so I love being down in Florida. So anywhere in the South Florida area was just great to me. I truly I'd say Palm Beach is one of my favorite locations in Florida. But of course, New Smyrna Beach, I always got to give a shout out. So I know it's not 3, but I got some favorite places here.
I hope that somebody learned something or is going to go visit one of those places and go experience it on your own. We're the Marlow experts. If you have any questions, we can be reached at 1-800-362-2657. My name is Captain Eric Gervais, at marlowmarine.com. We are the Everything Yachting YouTube channel. Thanks for visiting us today, and I hope you learned something and enjoyed the content. And if there's something you'd like us to create in the future, send me an email and let me know. I'll find an expert like Bryce here, and we'll sit down and have a conversation. Thanks again for joining us today. Thanks for joining us at Everything Yachting. I hope you've enjoyed diving into the yachting world today. If you've enjoyed or learned something, please subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more. Until next time, my friends, healthy families, happy memories, and may fair winds and smooth seas guide your future yachting adventures.